Hey, and welcome to another 31 Days of Horror 2015 segment, Toronto After Dark edition. That's right. Today we are talking about the second film from Sunday, October 18th, called The Hollow One. This film is essentially about a family, a father and two daughters who have lost their mother, and what happens is the father and the youngest daughter are curious about her past, because nobody in this family seems to know anything about their mother's past, oddly enough. So he hires a private detective to try and find out whatever he can. Now, the oldest daughter is not too happy because she was directly involved in the death of her mother. There was a driving accident, and she didn't take it very well. Her and her boyfriend were involved in the car, and essentially that killed her mother. And so her boyfriend went away to jail. She went away, sort of left and went away to school. I think it was school. And this is her returning back to the farm. She's drawn, and he's at the same time he's out of jail, and he comes, back to town. So it's sort of all of these people coming back to this farm. And it's part of a mystery type thing where you gotta learn the backstory of this one character who is dead, but it's all wrapped up in this sort of ghost story of such, where clearly there was some weird stuff going on, and what happens is the private detective or investigator finds some information, and he delivers this information to the father, and it generally involves a weird contraption, a device of some sort, perhaps alien, who knows, whatever. It's just really, really weird. And then obviously some notes to go along with it. And unfortunately, this device of sorts, it's not something you should play around with. But seeing as how they don't know what it is, they play around with it. And things start to go bad. And that's where the sort of like the ghost story elements start coming into play. And people start getting essentially like possessed, almost zombie-ish. So start meeting up with the townsfolk. They're all getting possessed and such, and nobody seems to know where the dad is gone and what's going on. It's just a really, really weird situation that's come about because of this, essentially a device that they didn't know about. And so the story is one where it unravels the spooky ghost elements on top of this, very much like any ghost story where it's, somebody has died and you got to learn their backstory to be able to solve the mystery that is what's going on and why all these bad things are happening. And so in that sense, it was quite well done, actually. It was very, very convincing. The set design and everything was good. They picked a good location. The CG elements, because there's going to be lots of CG in these weird, spooky ghost type stuff. Was okay. It was decent. I thought it didn't look too bad. But yeah, it's just not perfect for a few reasons. But yeah, I guess one of them would be Nathan Hendrickson, the director, who, though he's directed Aliens vs. Predator 2 and The Matrix and Lord of the Rings video games. This is his first feature film. He has directed a whole bunch of different cinematics for video games. And if you don't know what that is, essentially if you're playing sort of like a video game that has a story rather than just, action and fighting and stuff like that, what the cinematics are generally plot points in the video game that everybody has to experience. So you'll be playing it and you'll be doing whatever, beating up something or learning a new clue, and then the cinematic will pop up, which will be, maybe it's a person telling you some information or some clues, something to advance the plot, or perhaps it's a reveal of some, big event of some sort. Maybe it's some backstory that you're learning. Either way, and everybody playing the video game gets to these cinematics. Well, depending on the video game, some have multiple paths, but generally you get through these cinematics because this is what advances the plot. You play the video game and do all these things to get to the next cinematic to advance that plot. And so this is what he's directed. This is all he's directed up until this point, and this was his first feature film because he always wanted to direct a movie, a real movie. So this is that project, and you can see in the film that cinematic, aesthetic is there. I didn't realize he had directed all these video game segments before I saw the movie, but during the Q&A he mentioned, that's what he had started off on. That's what he does, and I immediately thought, yeah, okay, I can see the influence here, because there are aspects in this film where, it's going along, blah, 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 action, scary moments, and then you get these moments in the film where it's like, here's the cinematic, where it's like, we're going to advance the plot, or we're going to do this type of, reveal of something. And so it was quite interesting after the fact to look at it and go, yeah, I can see some, influence from that whole video game experience that he had. And so I don't know whether it was a good thing or a bad thing necessarily, but it was definitely there. But I mean, a lot of films have that, whether they know it or not, whether it's intentional or not. There is that whole cinematic type element where here, this portion of dialogue that's going on is, we're going to advance the plot. We're going to tell the story. Or this, big event type thing. This is where we're going to advance the plot type thing. And the rest of it is just whatever, it's filler, it's the entertainment portion of it. But yeah, he did for somebody who's never directed a film before, I thought he did a pretty good job here. The main in this film is a Kate Alden, who plays Rachel, and she was surprisingly really good. She had only really done one film before this called The Device. I've never seen it, so I don't have anything to rely. But I liked her in this film. I really did. I thought she played the part really, really well of the girl who, everything's essentially happening to her. It's all revolving around her. She's the eldest daughter. And so she's the one who's having to figure out all this mystery, and yet at the same time she's not. She's mostly too involved with everything that's going on, right? Like she's getting flashbacks. She's seeing all these these demons and this stuff going on, and the apparitions and all this kind of stuff. She's seeing all this crazy stuff that's going on. So at the same time, it's hard for her to figure it out, because that's one of those things where you always wonder in ghost stories and such, where it's like the main character is constantly being haunted. For some reason, they sort of stop being haunted for a little bit, and that's where you advance the plot, or their hauntings aren't as scary, right? So they're able to figure things out. That often happens in ghost stories, and it's just one of those things that's really weirded me out. It's like, up until this point, they were freaked out, and then, here we are, we need to figure out the backstory or the elements of why this is happening. So we're going to make this section a little less scary. Well, with Kate, that really doesn't happen. It does a little bit, but some of the scary moments are what she's trying to, where she's learning about this backstory. Most of the actual figuring out of things is actually quite comical, and I don't think it's intentional. And that's played by her younger sister, who's played by an actor named Chelsea Farthing, who's never really done anything previous to this, and it kind of shows. She is the one element that really seems amateur in compared to the rest of the film, unfortunately. And I don't know whether it's because of her and her skill, or whether it was because of what was written for her, because she has a lot of the elements of, oh my god, we got to figure this out. So it's constantly, whenever anything's happening, it's like the shit's hitting the fan, and she's like, oh my god, I've got to go back and get the information so we can figure this out. And she takes off by herself, and then she'll get there and she'll look at these. When you're looking at these pages, it's like it may have 5 words on the page and then a drawing, and she'll go, oh, I figured it all out. It's like there's hardly any information here. How are you figuring anything out? Like her jumps of logic don't really make much sense. Nobody has any backstory information that would help them figure things out in this film. And that's one of the aspects of this film that I'll get into later. But for some reason, she pieces things together to come to some kind of conclusion or solution type thing, right? The boyfriend is actually played by Jesse James, who has been, like, he's probably one of the most experienced people on this set, oddly enough. He's been in filmmaking since he was a young boy, and played in things such as As Good As It Gets, Gods and Monsters. Let's see, what else was there? There was Blow and Pearl Harbor and The Butterfly Effect. Of course, these are all, he's playing a kid character in these things, right? And eventually, he ended up as Billy Lutz in the Amityville Horror remake. He was in Fly Boys, Jumper. So, I mean, in terms of big Hollywood films, he's done his, he's been there. He's been on big Hollywood sets. And so here we jump into, this low budget film, and I mean, he's done other stuff as well, but he really is one of the more experienced people on the set, and he plays, the sort of like the calm boyfriend, protective figure, and he does a really good job of it, right? It's really weird because, Chelsea is really the only kind of the weakest link in this film, because everybody else seems to be doing a really good job. But because of her and her roles, it sort of or her part in the movie, it leads me to the other part of this film that I really had a problem with, and it was sort of intentional. Because one of the things you learn about this device, this thing, is that it is like older than time, and it's like older than language that we know, all this kind of stuff. So it's one of those things where nobody has any idea what this stuff does, why it's coming about. And so it doesn't matter what kind of backstory, what kind of solution-solving, conclusion type thing people in the characters in the film are coming up with. No matter what, they still will never know, because nobody knows. Anything that was ever involved with this has died out long ago. And so, and this was intentional. This was something that, the director decided to do, because he wrote the film as well. This was something he decided to do. This was an element he wanted to pursue, because it was, this was honestly, this was part of the video game aspect that I think he's pulling on, because he's got this huge world mythos that he's created, but this is just a small little story in this huge mythos, which is often a video game thing, right? Like, you'll have this big story, but you're only going to tell this small little story because that's what you're playing, but it allows for, here's your sequels, here's your spin-offs, here's your, your merchandising stuff, and each one of these things can tell a little more of the story or another aspect of the story or give you more backstory, or you can play a completely different video game based in the same world type thing, right? And it's almost like he's done that with this movie, which kind of leaves us as the viewer going, well, this is kind of stuff the characters in the film, they have no real way of winning because of it, and us as a viewer of the film, we kind of feel, because you kind of want to have that control, you kind of want to have that resolution, right? But you never really get it because nobody knows enough information. So we can't know enough information. We just know that nobody will never know enough information unless they do a huge story that's not even remotely revolving around what's going on in this film. So yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it was one of those things that kind of let me down about this movie. I do like when you have a story like this, a little bit more resolution. So unless there ends up being, the Hollow One 2, where we get to learn more about this Hollow One, this creature, then yeah, you just kind of leave the film, at least in my opinion, leave the film a little hollow yourself, right? You are hollow because you didn't get enough information to really fulfill the standard criteria of a film in this type of subgenre, if you will. So yeah, that's not to say it was bad. I really enjoy it. I think people who are into ghost films, they like that spookiness, they like the the jump scares and the tension and all that kind of stuff. You'll probably dig this film. It may not be your favorite film, it may not be top of your list or even near the top of your list, but I'd say it's a good, at least in the middle. It's not a bad one, not a bad one at all. And it is interesting, and it is a little bizarre. There are some really bizarre elements about this. So, I mean, if that's the type of film you're into, you love ghost movies, you love those ghost stories, you love the mysteries and finding that out, then I think The Hollow One has a lot of what you're going to be into. But keep in mind that because, like I said, they don't reveal a lot of the information that you need to get the entire story, that it will maybe seem a little hollow. And as such, you may not like it quite as much. Now, there is a lot of, there's some twists in this film as well as not giving you all the information. So it can be a little confusing. Not a lot, but a little bit. And that's often a problem with these low-budget films of this subgenre. But in this case, I think there's enough of what you need to make it work, unlike a lot of other films where you're just scratching your head going, what? So I would give The Hollow One a recommend. Definitely give it a recommend. I enjoyed it. I'll probably eventually add it to my collection, because there was a lot in it that I liked, and the things that I didn't like, well, you know what? A lot of it wasn't intentional. And when it's intentional and it's done with a purpose in mind and not just simply because, then it's hard to fault it. Because it's not, honestly, I would give it a recommend. I'll say, if I was going to rate this one out of 5, I'll give it around a 3. It's about a 3. I think, shorter, and like I said, it's the Chelsea's character in this film, the young daughter. It's just like, honestly, it was, things she did were so comical, and it pulled me out of this film whenever she was doing like really stupid stuff. But it's like the director was like, I've got to somehow give them enough information so that they can come to a conclusion of their own in this film and maybe solve it. But in reality, it's like, but how? Anyways, I could probably rant on about that portion of the film alone for probably another 30 minutes. So I will end this one here and say thanks for watching this 31 Days of Horror 2015 Toronto After Dark segment video. There's more to come because there's more Toronto After Dark. So, until next time, take care. Have a good one.